And box A is really what you want to focus on the loan estimate. That's what your lender is charging you. If they're charging you origination points, if they're charging you processing fees, if they're charging you anything, it'll be in box A on that loan estimate. Now, there are other fees that are associated with refinancing and or purchasing a home, title fees, if you're in an escrow state, escrow fees, if you're in an attorney state, attorney fees, and whatever. Now, your taxes and your impounds and all that, that's going to be the same regardless of what lender you use. So that stuff isn't really negotiable. But if you're talking lender to lender and comparing those fees, then box A is where you want to look.
Awesome. Now, what about this? Is this logical thinking as well too? Like, let's say somebody you only owe 20 years. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jose Luiz Morales Show. This is episode number 78. Today we have Jeb Smith. He is with Coldwell Banker. He is a real estate broker, previous mortgage loan officer, social media influencer, and also just somebody that's looking to provide tons of value. So if you stop by his channel, he's consistently providing education and knowledge to the consumers. Today's topic, we're going to be talking on a variety of things. We're going to be talking about whether we are in a real estate housing bubble. We're going to be talking about mortgage forbearance, what that means for the market. We're going to be giving tips for first-time home buyers. We're going to be giving tips for people looking to purchase their first investment property. So we're going to cover a large amount of topics, but the guest that we have today is very well versed in all of that. Welcome to the show, Jeb. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jose. Jose, I appreciate you having me here, man. Let me be on the show and talk to your viewers and listeners.
Perfect, man. Before we get into the show, I just want to remind our viewers that if you've enjoyed some of our previous content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. So let's get into it, Jeb. Who is Jeb Smith and how did you get into the real estate industry?
So I am a real estate broker here in Southern California, located in the Orange County market, which a lot of people out there are aware of, whether they've been here or not, just south of LA, north of San Diego. And I've been in the business almost 20 years. I moved to California in late 2002 and got right into the real estate business straight out of college. Was a computer science major, did nothing with it, but landed in real estate in California because some of my family friends were in the business at the time. And that was right when, things were starting to move again. I'm a numbers guy coming from the computer science world, wanted to be in some sort of sales, and honestly just kind of fell into the business, loved it, and have stayed with it because I enjoy the process of being able to educate and guide people through what could be a difficult process otherwise.
Perfect, man. And that's the same thing that I love about the real estate industry, the education part. So you started off on the lending side and then you transitioned over to the real estate side. How long were you in lending? And then how long have you been in the real estate side?
So I was in lending as my I wouldn't say my primary focus, but it was the large majority of what I was focusing on at the time for about 10 years, give or take. And so I owned a mortgage company, had people working for me, loan officers, and we went through the debacle of the housing, crash, so to speak, which started in 2007, 2008 through, 2011, 2012. And I was in the business that entire time. I was still doing loans, but I started to get frustrated with the process of doing loans just because of how strenuous it was. I felt like more of a counselor and a coach than an actual loan professional. It was more it wasn't that I was arguing with clients, but a lot of people had purchased houses prior to that, and they never had to go and have the due diligence that they had otherwise, right? The pendulum swung from one side to the other, and it just became a frustrating process. And I had some other opportunities, some other avenues to really start to focus solely on real estate, which is what I enjoyed anyway. It was hard to break from the mortgage side just because that's where a good book of my business was coming in. But I made the leap and was able to actually dive right into the foreclosure world in 2009, 2010, kind of doing both simultaneously. And then really, 2012 or so, went straight into real estate and didn't do any loans at that time, but continue to follow it just so I can, stay up to date with clients and helping them guide, through the process and what have you.
And I think that's one of the things that makes you unique or makes you stand out. The fact that you're very well versed, you know the lending side extremely well. you know the foreclosure side, now you know the real estate side as well too, which I think that makes it well. So here's a question that everybody's talking about. Everybody's talking about, is the real estate housing market going to crash? Are we in a bubble? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't. I don't. In no way do I believe there's going to be a crash. A bubble is one of those questions that it's really. I mean, what is your definition of a bubble? Are prices inflated a little bit? Yeah, they're inflated a little bit, but they're inflated because of fundamentals, which is supply and demand, right? So if you go back to anything in history that has driven up prices in really any industry. I mean, and it goes off supply and demand, right? When you have a lack of something and you have a lot of people that want something, the price is going to continue to go up. And that's why, for one, our grandparents were able to purchase homes, in the teens of thousands of dollars, $15,000-$20,000 in some cases. And those homes today are worth over $1 million, right? And it baffles me when people say, well, prices are above where they were in the past, therefore they have to retract. No, the only way prices are going to change is if demand drops and we get some sort of influx of supply. And I don't see either of those happening at the moment, just because you have interest rates, right? Interest rates are a key driver in the market. And they have been prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic, things were, a little fire was added, fuel was added to that fire. And it just, it put buying in a different position because the payments were lower than they were when people were looking a year prior, when home prices were actually less than they were during this time. So, you got this added fuel. And with all of that, you've had, prices just continue to rise. Plus you have millennials, right? And everybody wants to discount the millennials, but the millennials are becoming prime buying age. They're now reaching that point in their lives where they need houses. And so they're coming into the market, and people are wondering, well, how are they affording these properties? Well, one is a lot of them have good paying jobs. A lot of them have lived at home a lot longer than, say, I did when I left at 18 and went to college. So a lot of them have lived through, their 20s or so and stayed at college or at home and saved money. In addition, you've got a whole different dynamic playing into the market, which I don't think a lot of people are factoring in, and that's the baby boomers, right? A lot of people expected the baby boomers to sell property and move to retirement or to downsize or what have you, and those properties would become available. And what we've seen is exactly the opposite of that. We've seen people stay in place because those baby boomers are looking at the market going, what can I purchase for that's less than what I have now, single level or whatever. And they go out and they look at the market and they go, well, I can't purchase anything, right? I mean, it's more expensive actually to purchase that than just to stay put where I am at the moment. And so those boomers are staying in place and they're aging in place, which is keeping inventory off the market. But at some point, I forget the actual number, but there's billions of dollars in equity in these boomers' property. That money is going to pass along generational, right? It's going to go to the younger families, those millennials in some cases that are looking to buy property, which in my opinion is going to continue to give these potential buyers the amount of money that they need for down payment, along with parents helping out. I mean, I have a lot of clients that are purchasing their first home, and the down payment, a lot of it's coming from parents who have saved money and or have cashed out equities in some case to give their kids money to buy a house, because otherwise they feel like they're reaching a point where if they don't do it now, it might be too late in a couple of years. And I realize that's a really long way of getting to the fact that I don't believe they're a bubble, just because there's too much demand, not enough supply. And we can go back and talk about the home builders and the lack of homes they're building and how many homes were short. But I mean, we could really talk about this for 30 minutes straight. But, in lieu of doing that, I'll just say, no, I don't believe it, because I feel like the fundamentals at the moment are pretty solid.
Yeah, it's funny because as a real estate agent, I talk to customers all the time, and they say, well, the last time we crashed, prices were at 800,000. Now we're at 800 again. We're going to crash because the last time they crashed, we were at 800. What they're not taking into consideration is that the cost of living over that time has gone up, meaning rents back then maybe were 2,400. Now they're 3,200. Groceries were X, now they're Y, so they're not taking into account that over time things naturally go up. A friend of mine said this quote. He said, houses are not more expensive. The dollar is worth less, meaning that the dollar
Absolutely.
has been devalued because of all the printing of money. Let me ask you this, just for mindset, where do you go for your information whenever you want to find out? Because there's a lot of information out there, Jeb. People, like, you go on TikTok, people are saying, oh, the foreclosure market, you gotta be ready. We're going to experience the largest crash. And I almost feel like they drive fear to individuals. And I've had family members, I've had people that for the last 6 years, they've been preaching that the market's going to crash, and they haven't done anything in the last 6 years. Yet the market has gone up 200,000-300,000 during that time. So where do you go for information? Like, do you listen to what the media is telling you? Do you take all the information that you see online, or how does somebody come up with their own conclusion whether or not the real estate market's actually going to crash? And yeah, how would somebody go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's a tough question, and it's hard to navigate, right? Because what happens is, I mean, this is my experience, right? Is that when you tend to get a belief in something, you continue to follow that belief, right? It's no different than politics. If you believe one side, then you watch a certain news station to continue to get the same information so that your beliefs are secure and you feel good about what you're talking about and what have you. And that's where people start, the housing follows a similar deal. If you believe there's a crash coming, then you're watching a lot of the crash stuff, and then vice versa. But I try to follow people that have, a history of making the right decisions, that they voiced their opinions, when the last debacle happened, and they said that, hey, this is on the horizon. These are things you need to be careful about, save your money, that sort of thing. And never necessarily said that, hey, this is going to go down 50%, because I don't think anybody really knew that, but they just saw the writing on the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, mentors like Brian Buffini, right? I'm a big Brian Buffini fan. I follow Brian. I'm in his coaching, and I don't follow him just because I feel like he knows everything, but he has access to a lot of information, right? He has a whole team that is looking at information, and he's trying to pull information that, pending sales, existing sales, the lack of inventory, the demand, like he's looking at this stuff and making sensible decisions. At the same time, looking at economists, I wouldn't say the National Association of Realtors is always going to be, the problem is that people believe, and this is honestly part of the problem, is that people truly believe that the National Association of Realtors and some of these big associations out there are truly trying to pump the market to a point that, so that it won't go down. And I don't believe that, right? I believe they're there truly providing data, and it's up to you to decipher it, if you decipher it any differently than they do. But, there's a good economist out there, Lawrence Yun, for example, that's looking at this information, and he's not 100% rosy on this information at all times, right? I mean, but I will say that back in March and April of 2020, they basically called what was going to happen over the next 6 to 8 months. And it truly came down to the fundamentals of the economy, the supply and demand. And so I try to read in more into that. I mean, I talk all the time about, sensational headlines, how the media puts out, for example, if pending home sales drop month over month, it's this whole thing that the market's slowing, that the market's cooling. And honestly, from us as a quote unquote influencer standpoint, or a YouTuber or whatever, yeah, those headlines get people to watch videos, right? Or they grab attention. But the reality is, unless you're addressing that in the video or in the conversation or on your podcast, then people will continue to believe it otherwise. And so I think you've got to come in with the information to back up why. Like, okay, so pending home sales went down month over month, but why did they go down? Why could they have, why could it be this versus that? And understand where we're coming from, right? We've seen crazy growth month over month. So a small decline between, last month and this month, is it really a big deal based on the numbers that we've seen? Or is it expected because the last 6 years, every July, pending home sales in the month of July have gone down, right? I mean, that sort of thing. It's reading into the information and trying to follow. I mean, I read the Wall Street Journal, right? I mean, I read Housing Wire, I read all of these real estate websites, and obviously there's some biased opinions on a lot of these articles, but I try to get into the data of it, and then I also use my experience, right? If people tell me, hey, the market's cooling, And I'm going out there showing property to 5 buyers this week, and every single offer has multiple offers. Every single offer is going above the asking, and I'm not getting anywhere. Okay, well, maybe the market's cooling in your market, but it's not cooling in mine. And I'm trying to convey that to people, in video, saying, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing in my market, and again, real estate's local, but a lot of things, if it's happening in Southern California, chances are it's happening in a lot of major markets otherwise, in other places as well.
Well, I think you hit a couple of topics right on the head. Number one is, like, sometimes when you look at mass media, what they're covering is maybe national, and that might not be what's happening in your marketplace, meaning that your market could be different. The other thing is to go based on numbers. Like in 2010, I bought my first property, and at that time, there was, I don't know if you remember this, people were saying that there was going to be shadow inventory coming to the marketplace.
Still hearing that.
And I remember hearing that, and my family members were telling me, don't buy. And I looked at the numbers and I said, well, look, at this, my payment is this, market rent for that is that. If it drops anymore, I'm okay with that because the numbers made sense for me at that point. So I think that people have to take the information that they hear, but also use logical. I like looking at the numbers, meaning in my market, I noticed that in the last crash, there was 1,400 active foreclosures. Right now, there's like 10 active foreclosures, meaning like the last time it crashed, it was 1,400. Right now, there's 10 foreclosures. So that'll tell you a lot of a lot. So what about this? I don't know the precise number, but according to what I see, there's a lot of people in forbearance. I know that number has been going down. Do you see any potential impact on that in the marketplace? Or are some of these forbearances being worked out by the lenders and coming up with creative solutions to make that work for them?
Yeah, the second. I think the last number that I saw, I either read it today or yesterday. I think there's 1.48 million people or something in forbearance. So still a decent number of people in forbearance, and the media again will claim that there's 1.4 million people delinquent on their mortgage. Yeah, they're allowed to be delinquent. They were told you can miss your payments up to 18 months in some cases, maybe even longer. So yeah, they're delinquent, but when you're allowed to be, I'm not counting those numbers as people that truly may affect the market, because some people took it because they were allowed to take it, right? I knew people that took forbearance for a year that didn't need to take forbearance. They just saved money. And guess what? The lenders are now working on the back end to help these people stay in properties. We've seen things such as 40-year mortgages in some cases to amortize these balances. Some of them reducing the principal balance by 25% on the first, throwing that along with the missed payments to a silent second as a partial claim. So now their first balance is lower than it was before they started this. All the missed payments, all of that's on the back of the loan. In addition, they've gained equity, right? It's not like prices have fallen in the last year and a half to a point where these people are in a position where, hey, look, they missed, 18 months of payments and values decreased by 20%. No, values decreased on average across the United States, probably 15, 20% during that period of time. And so most people are better off financially as far as their equity now than they were before the whole thing started. And so yeah, you're going to have people that can't work it out with the lender for one reason or another. You're going to have some people that say, screw it, I'm not going to call my lender, I'm not going to work with my lender, and just say, forget it completely. And so there will be some that result in foreclosures. There will be people that need to sell their property because they can't afford the payment or whatever the reason is. But the reality is, because of the lack of inventory, and this is something I can tie back to the foreclosure market from last time, and I'll talk about in a minute, but these properties, when they come to market, are going to be at fair market value, right? So if that property is worth $500,000, chances are it's going to sell for $500,000. It's not going to sell for $300 just because the person couldn't continue to make their payments. And the reason I say that is because last time I went through this and I was selling foreclosures for Fannie Mae, for Wells Fargo, and some of these big companies, is that by the end of the crisis, we were selling properties at market value. There were no more discounts to be had on these properties because the banks realized that there was demand out there, that people wanted property. And so they realized, hey, I do a little bit of carpet paint, maybe a little bit of upgrading here and there, I can actually get what the property's worth versus having to serve it out at a discount. And so as long as supply stays low, you're not going to have this debacle, so to speak. I mean, 2008, there were 12 and a half months of supply of inventory. I think as a nation right now, we're somewhere around 2.5 months supply. So we've got a long way to go with regards to property increasing to even get anywhere close to that. And I also believe that if you saw a decrease in value at the moment, so say for example, your market decreased by 10% in the next 2 to 3 months, you're going to have a lot of people who missed the boat because either they backed out of the market because they got just emotional, they got tired, they got whatever, or they just wanted a break. Or maybe they got priced out and could never find anything and they just said, screw it. If prices pulled back to a point where they could get in, I guarantee you those people buy property, which is going to just take up that property that now decreased by 10%. And a lot of it's going to have multiple offers and drive the prices right back up. So it's all tied in together to demand. I mean, and supply. Everything goes back to that. And until that changes, I don't think you see a change in the market.
Fear is such a powerful thing, meaning that fear, I've had so many situations where people are so fearful that something's going to change in the marketplace. I remember a guy, 2012, I'm like, hey, look, the market's going up, inventory's low. That property, he would have bought it at 350. That same property is probably worth like 600 and some thousand now.
Oh, easily.
Didn't
Absolutely.
do it because of fear or sometimes getting information. The other thing that I notice is the real estate market's not like the stock market, meaning when it goes down, it happens gradually, meaning the stock market can drop from one day to another or used to be able to drop one day to another. The real estate market, you start to see patterns. You start to see the inventory go up. You start to see the notice of defaults as well too go up. I would recommend don't track how many people are in forbearance. Track the notice of defaults because that's the first signal. If you start seeing the notice of defaults, those are people actually in a state of foreclosure at that point.
Absolutely. And understand, even once that notice of default's been filed, you're talking in some cases a year, maybe even longer before that property ever comes to the market, depending on if that person wants to fight it or not. So again, it's not instantaneous, like you just said. It's gradual. And the one thing you mentioned a minute ago about people being fearful, what happens is if the market again dropped tomorrow by 20%, you would have so many people that should buy a property, but would be so panic stricken that it dropped by 20%, they wouldn't be able to pull the trigger until prices came all the way back up to where they were before. And then they would have had that moment of, hey, I should have purchased. And I think you're going to see more of that now. I think as you continue to see prices go up, you're going to have more and more people wish they had pulled the trigger and not waited. And I'm not here, as a cheerleader saying that the housing market's perfect, that everything is always has to go up. I don't believe that at all. I just believe at the moment, there's nothing that's going to change that.
Yeah. Cool. Let's start getting into some advice for our customers. Let's say that somebody is a first-time home buyer. They want to purchase their first property. What should be the first steps taken for them to be able to accomplish that?
You can go one of two ways. I mean, obviously the pre-approval is step one. I preach this all the time because I see a lot of people go out and they start looking at homes. They fall in love with the property to find out they can't actually afford it, and or to find out that they're actually searching in the complete wrong price range to start with. Maybe they can afford quite a bit more property than they were looking, and they've just been wasting a lot of time doing, and going to open houses and all this stuff. So pre-approval is step number one. And whether or not you find a real estate agent first or you find a mortgage professional first, if you find a realtor first, that realtor should be able to put you in touch with somebody that can guide you through that process and get you pre-approved. If you start with a mortgage professional first, exactly the opposite, right? They should be able to guide you. And maybe you already have a real estate agent in mind, but either way, getting the pre-approval nailed down. And when I say pre-approval, I'm talking actually having the lender run your credit, having them look at your tax returns, your pay stubs, your bank statements, going through the actual process and answering your questions, not calling a call center or the guy on the radio and just having a conversation and telling them your credit. Let them look at it, because otherwise you're going to get a lot of information that may not be accurate. And if you're serious about the process, you don't want to get into it, potentially lose the house, and or potentially get into escrow thinking that you're approved and potentially put your deposit at risk because the person on the other side didn't know what they were doing. So with that said, It's also helpful to get a couple of quotes too. If you go to a bank, maybe talk to a broker, talk to a credit union, and vice versa. Get a couple different quotes from a couple different people. Compare the numbers. And it's, again, the lowest number is not always the best person. So, I've done videos on it. There's a lot of information out there to watch, but just make sure you go through the process in the right way. And it's more of the turtle, right, versus the hare. Take your time and go through it correctly the first time, so that you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
If somebody doesn't have great credit, can they still purchase a home? Like, meaning, if somebody has below average credit, is there something that they can do to put themselves in a better position to be able to purchase a home? Meaning, is credit something that can be fixed?
Absolutely. Yeah. Credit can for sure be fixed. Working with, again, a knowledgeable, an expert is what I like to call them. And that's on the real estate side or the mortgage side when I say expert, but more on the mortgage side. If you get into the process and you get pre-approved, or maybe you already know that you have credit issues, talk to a professional on the mortgage side. They can guide you through the process. A lot of them can tell you what you need to do to get your credit up, and can refer you to people that can help you otherwise. But I think there's a lot of people out there that don't understand that, you don't have to have perfect credit to buy a house. You can, there are loans out there, FHA, that allow you to purchase with lower credit scores. And again, you'll have people that believe one way or the other that FHA is good or bad or what have you. But I would say here, at the end of the day, have the numbers run, compare them to, something. Maybe if you had better credit scores, have the lender show you what it looks like on paper. And so you have something to compare it to, versus just thinking, that one option is not the best option for you without actually knowing how it looks on paper. I've had several clients actually in the last year that have purchased using FHA loans, and because of where equity has gone and property appreciation's gone, these people were able to actually refinance and remove PMI, and they started with 3.5% down about a year ago. So, I mean, again, they're not for everyone. You've got to compare the payment, make sure you're comfortable. And there's obviously other things that you need to have in place as well, like reserves, and make sure you're not stretching yourself. And a longer term time horizon is what I say for most people buying a house in this market, or really any market. You don't want to think that you can buy a house this year and flip it next year, or sell it for more money next year, just because that's what's happened over the last year and a half. Yeah, it's been great in some regards, but it's giving people this false sense of that's how the market always works, and it's not the reality. So have a longer term time horizon, and again, talk to a lender and have them run numbers for you, and you can get a real perspective of where you are.
Yeah. What about people that maybe don't have down payment, like a huge amount? Can people get gifts? Are there any assistance programs on that? Have you ever worked with anything like that?
Here in the state of California, assistance is gone for the most part. Most of the state programs, they don't have money, and aren't really worth pursuing with regards to down payment assistance. Now, states like Texas and Georgia and some of the other states that have a lot of down payment assistance and a lot of different programs to offer. Again, a mortgage expert can guide you through the process. A lot of those, guys, girls know the programs and can tell you what you need to do in those cases. But, if you're a veteran, you've served in the military, you've done the proper time that they require and all that good stuff, you can purchase with no money down. FHA allows you to purchase with as little as 3.5% down. USDA allows you to purchase with no money down, 100% financing. So there are definitely programs out there, and definitely assistance as well. But it goes back to working with somebody that's knowledgeable and understands those, and can put them in front of you and help you understand how to pursue them if that's your goal.
Yeah. Now, what about refinancing? I know that obviously rates have gone down. I know back in the day, interest rates were 4.5%, 5%. What things should somebody look at if they're considering refinance? I get questions like this. Clients come to me like, should I do it? They don't really know what to look at. Like, they're offering me this, but then they're taking me back to a 30-year. I only owe 20 years or 25 years. What information, or what is the thought process somebody should be thinking when considering whether or not to refinance? Obviously, just depending on their goals and objectives.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's one of those things where you want to get multiple quotes, right? You want to talk to a couple different people and get an idea of what they're offering. You want to look at the interest rate clearly, but you also want to look at how it affects the monthly payment. How much money are you paying in order to get that loan? Are you being charged points? Are you being charged fees? Is the lender taking the cost and charging you these points and adding them back to your loan amount in order to make it look like a no cost loan, or is it truly no cost up front when buying that, when doing that refinance rather? Also, are you saving money because they're adding years back to your loan, like you mentioned? I mean, if you had a 20-year loan, if they're throwing you back into a 30-year, are you really saving money over the course of the loan because you're adding 10 years back to the term of your loan? So, having somebody, again, an expert, understand and explain that. I mean, my last refinance I did, which has been it's been over a year now. When rates dropped below 3%, I refinanced and I went back into the same term loan, right? I mean, actually I got a year better on the loan. I dropped my payment. So for me, and I paid no cost, right? So there were a lot of benefits. I got a lower monthly payment. I went down a year in my loan, which knocked a year off. And I didn't pay any fees to the lender to do it. Now, you're always going to have some sort of closing costs, right? You're going to have some title fees, some escrow fees, and that sort of thing. But a lot of cases, your lender can actually give you a credit to cover some of this stuff. So again, working with a couple different people, getting quotes, and having comparisons. That's what will tell you whether it makes sense or not, right? Having the numbers on paper, comparing it to where you are, now, versus what the new payment terms are going to be, new balance is going to be. And then once you have those numbers, again, my lender will say the numbers never lie, right? So if you're looking at the numbers, and that's what they can deliver, then, I think that helps in making the decision.
Is this logical thinking, Jeb? Like, let's say that your principal balance is 500, and let's say the lender says it's a no cost loan, but then on their quote, they say that your new principal balance is 510. Does that mean that there's $10,000 worth of fees in there? Or what does that mean? Because I know that, or I believe that sometimes you hear no cost loans or no cost this, so we won't charge you anything. But then why does the principal balance go up in some cases if it's really a no cost loan?
Right. So when you're doing a loan, right? I mean, a lot of people don't understand that you pay the loan balance, or you pay your monthly payment in arrears, which means that if you're making your August payment, you're actually paying the interest from the previous month, from July, right? And so what you think is your principal balance might not actually be your principal balance. So if your principal balance on your mortgage statement says you owe 500, chances are you probably owe like 502 or 503, just depending on how much your mortgage payment is, how much interest and all that stuff. But a lot of times when you close, there might be taxes that are due. Maybe you have some property taxes due. Maybe you're impounding your property taxes again because you want them included in your payment. There are certain fees that aren't necessarily fees that the lender is charging you, but they're things that have to be paid, whether they're paid now or paid at some point in the future, like property taxes and that sort of thing. So if you're in a position where you're impounding those and you don't have the money to pay them outside of the refinance, then they might be adding those back to the balance of your loan in order to cover those costs so that you're not having to come up with any money. In addition, if you had money in an impound account already set up and you refinance out of that loan, you would actually get a refund on those impounds. And sometimes you're able to transfer them and what have you, and that's a whole different conversation. But it doesn't always mean that there's $10,000 worth of closing costs in there that are associated with the lender, but there are things that have to be paid. And a lot of times, the lender's not responsible for those, and therefore the balance may go up a little bit to cover those costs.
Is there a document, Jeb, that like maybe I know you said a couple of times you should talk to 2 to 3 people. I know when people were comparing real estate agents, sometimes they compare cost or commission and they ask for a seller net sheet or something like that. Is there a document that a buyer can request from a lender that basically would allow him to compare apples to apples, meaning, okay, what are these fees? How much is this? And what is there a name to that document?
Yeah, it's a loan estimate. And box A is really what you want to focus on the loan estimate. That's what your lender is charging you. If they're charging you origination points, if they're charging you processing fees, if they're charging you anything, it'll be in box A on that loan estimate. Now there are other fees that are associated with refinancing and or purchasing a home, title fees, if you're in an escrow state, escrow fees, if you're in an attorney state, attorney fees, and whatever. Now your taxes and your impounds and all that, that's going to be the same regardless of what lender you use. So that stuff isn't really negotiable. But if you're talking lender to lender and comparing those fees, then box A is where you want to look.
Awesome. Now, what about this? Is this logical thinking as well too? Like, let's say somebody you only owe 20 years and your lender wants or is recommending that you refinance, but they're going to put you back at 30 years. Would a way to kind of do the math, if it benefits you, is to take the monthly payment, principal and interest at 20 years and then take the monthly payment at 30 years and kind of see what you would pay over the long run at all to see if it actually benefits you at all? Because at 30 years, you might be, obviously your payment might be lower, but it's because it's an extra 10 years, it's amortized over an extra 10 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you can do that. I mean, what I find in a lot of these cases, honestly, is that, and whether or not this is the right thinking or not, is that people want the lowest monthly payment.
Yeah.
Right. And so if it adds 10 years to the balance of their loan, people are like, I don't care. I'm not going to pay it off anyway. I don't care what happens. I want the lowest monthly payment now. Clearly not the best way to think about it, quite frankly. Not how I think about it, but some people just have the mentality that they're never going to pay it off anyway. They're looking for the lowest monthly payment now. And therefore, if that payment gets them to where, that meets their objective, if you will, then they move forward. But yeah, you should, again, if it costs you, and another thing is if you plan on selling a house in 2 years, and this is something people don't really consider, is they're like, well, I'm planning on moving in 3 or 4 years anyway, but I'm going to refinance now. And it might cost them X amount to do it. And then if you take the savings and divide it into X amount, it might take them 8 years to repay that. Right. But people don't think that far ahead. They're more worried about what's going to happen now. Am I able to save money right this second? So, you've got to take what it's going to cost you, divide it into how much you're saving, how many months is that going to be before you actually break even on that mortgage. And then you can tell whether or not it makes sense to do it. And again, what I say is people live in the payment, not the price. And the same goes for buying a house, right? People are more worried about how much their monthly payment is versus the value of their house. And you mentioned earlier, that you had clients reach out to you that a $800,000 home was the same price as it was back in 2006 or 7 or 8 or whatever, and therefore it has to go down. Well, that $800,000 house today is significantly less expensive than it was back in 2006 because interest rates are down, 2%, 3% from then. I mean, that same house, it's not even comparable to the cost it was back in 2005 and 2006, 2007, 2008. So, people live in the payment, not the price. And that's why, as long as interest rates go low, it doesn't really matter where prices go, as long as people can, get the payment to where they'll fit, because people will continue to buy.
Yeah. Not only that, but like when I look at that situation, people are like, well, the market's going to crash because it was 800 now and it was 800 before, but they don't take into consideration that now there's something called an accessory dwelling unit as well too. Before, you couldn't cash flow on a property. The property couldn't, your payment was $5,000. That property could only rent for $2,500. Now the ADU law allows you to convert a portion of your house or even the garage into an additional unit. Is that happening in Orange County where people are utilizing this? And what impact do you see that on the marketplace? I almost feel myself like it's making the prices of single families go up more because people are factoring that in there. They're factoring in, well, if I just convert a garage or build a unit in the back, I can collect $4,000 worth of rent. That pays for most of my mortgage. I don't care about paying an extra $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Do you see that at all in your market?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of houses that are selling houses that have ADUs, just because when they do, they get gobbled up. People are willing to pay top dollar for them. But I am seeing some of these lots in, like, for example, I have a client that's been looking in like the North Long Beach area. And these are I wouldn't say not expensive properties, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, 600 to 650,000 here in Southern California is on the lesser of the expensive side. But these properties, some of them have like a small little unit in the back, which is not even, I wouldn't classify it as an ADU, but you could potentially add on to it and or rent it out. People are paying top dollar for these, and in lots that are big enough where people can actually add something in the back. You know, bigger lots allow you to add some of these ADUs where they don't really affect the lot, you know, the yard of the single family so much. People are paying top dollar for them. A lot of people are looking for opportunity. I have clients all the time saying, "Hey, listen, if you know, I want something with an ADU." I'm like, "Yeah, you and everybody else, right?" I mean, it's very, very hard to find in this market. And like you said, they're selling for top dollar because of that potential income that comes along with them.
Well, I work with investors sometimes, and they're factoring that in my market. Even myself, like I bought a property, a single family with a detached garage. We're making a junior ADU, and we're doing the ADU in the back. So we're turning a house into 3 units, basically.
Oh, wow.
Factor in the three potentials. Now you've got, instead of collecting 3,000 in rent, you're like close to 7 or 8,000. Not only that, but I own a 25 unit apartment. And on that 25 unit apartment, I'm getting permits for 9 additional accessory dwelling units. So it applies for multi-unit as well too. So you take a 25 unit, it's now a 34 unit instead of a 25 unit. Now you're increasing the value of the property because you're adding all this additional income. So I see it as a great opportunity. What if somebody's looking to buy their first investment property? Let's say that they're looking to buy an investment. Are there any tips that you would give as it relates to how to think about it, what to do, maybe what not to do? Does it make sense? Are prices too high to buy an investment as well too?
Yeah, I mean, my go-to when talking about investment property is: are you buying a property for cash flow, or are you buying for appreciation? And some people say both. And clearly that is the main goal, to be able to get a property that not only appreciates but cash flows. Here in Southern California, it's tough without having a large down payment, right? I mean, because of where prices are, in order to buy something that cash flows. I mean, everybody wants Southern California and some of these other hot markets because they appreciate. The appreciation has been really good. It's always been good, but it's hard to get it to cash flow just because of where prices have gone without a large down payment. So, you know, Airbnb is a whole different objective, and these short-term rentals and that whole thing. I don't really get into all of that just because you don't know what laws are going to change and that could affect that property being rented at some point in the future. And now you've got some big mortgage and you can't rent it out, you know, it's no longer going to cash flow. So I try to stay away from that, but there are definitely markets out there across the United States. If you're open to markets that do, you know, that outside of your area that do cash flow, with, you know, a lower down payment, 20% in some cases for an investment property. So I think there are opportunities out there and good opportunities. But I tell people, if you're looking to buy investment properties, even in some of those areas, you know, you find places where job growth is increasing, or businesses are coming in, because all of that is going to add value to the area over the long term. You're not going to have to worry about, you know, big companies leaving and taking all the workers and your potential tenants with them. So you want growth in areas. And I think at the moment, there's obviously a lot of those markets just because of people migrating out of high cost states like California and some of these other states. So yeah, I mean, it could go really deep on the conversation, but I think there are great opportunities out there. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. And do you need to be, you know, are you okay with a property manager running it versus you not being able to have hands on and all of that stuff?
Yeah. I think the best thing that happened to investors in California right now is the accessory dwelling unit law. Personally, I think that allows people to underwrite deals differently, and you could add tons of value to properties because you can increase the rents tremendously, which I would agree with you on that. I also read a book called Emerging Real Estate Markets by David Lindahl, and it talked about just that whenever you're analyzing which market to invest into, to look at population and job growth, which is exactly what you're describing right there. What about potential sellers, Jeb? Is it a good time to sell a property? And what should somebody start to do if they're considering selling a property? Is any time a good time? Meaning like summer the best time, spring, winter? What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good time to be a seller. Here's my thing for sellers though. Have a plan, have a strategy. Don't just think that you're going to sell your property and go find the next one that, even if you're going up in value. And or if you think you're just going to sell and go rent something. I see it happening a lot at the moment, is people wanting to take advantage of the market, thinking, hey, you know what, prices are high. I'm going to sell my property here, and I'm going to go to Austin, Texas, because it's less expensive, and I'm going to go buy a property there. Well, guess what? Austin, Texas, Boise, Idaho, all of these other markets where the values are crazy. There's no inventory. People are bidding far above and beyond the list price on these properties. So having a plan is key, right? Just cashing out is one thing, but you need to know what you're going to do. And be able to research it and actually have something that's viable. In fact, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal. We were talking about the Wall Street Journal. A lady sold her property in in Beverly Hills or somewhere in LA, like a posh area. She got 500% more than she paid for the property, which she was in the property like 20 plus years. I don't remember the exact number, but 20 plus years, sold it 500% more. Her goal, she was going to sell something and go buy in Santa Barbara. And she went and started looking at property in Santa Barbara and realized that she thinks that the values are inflated. And that to me is like almost mind boggling, that you think, okay, I just received top dollar for my property, multiple offers, that in some world you think that you're going to be able to go out and find something less expensive in Santa Barbara just because, it's a different market. I mean, that's what people aren't factoring in, is that while real estate is local at the moment, we have the same problems everywhere, which is low supply, high demand. And so the idea that you think you're just going to take advantage of the market and go buy something for less expensive or what have you, okay, that works if there's actually something out there. But what I think is going to happen is you're going to have people sitting on the sidelines thinking that home prices are going to pull back, and there's going to be a huge portion of the people that don't end up getting back in the market for one reason or another, or end up paying more money for that property later down the road because things didn't go as planned. So if you're considering selling your property, having a plan, typically, most markets, the spring market is when things start to heat up. That's when inventory starts to come to the market. Buyers are out in full force. This time's a little bit different. I think we're getting more back into the cyclical market, the seasonality of the market. So I think, this winter, this fall, so to speak, is going to get us back to where we are, which means, demand's probably going to pull off a little bit. Inventory is going to go down. And then as we get into the new year, you're going to see the market pick back up. But I would say if competition remains low, you've got a great property and a great, neighborhood. When there's no competition, it's a great time to take advantage of that. So, it could be the best time, or it could be waiting in a couple of months. But I do believe that home prices are likely going to move sideways to up. We're not going to see the same appreciation that we've seen over the last year and a half, in my opinion. But I do think the worst of the inventory levels being super low, suppressed, are over. But at the same time, I don't think you're going to see any huge increases either. So I think you're going to see some gradual movement in the market, 2-3% up over the next year and a half, maybe even a little bit more. Each person's situation is a little bit different, but I think people need to think more about the plan versus just what's happening in the moment and trying to capitalize.
Absolutely, 100%. It sounds like that lady was wishful thinking that she can
Absolutely.
sell a dollar and then go steal something somewhere else. Good. What about this? Do you think that the inventory dropped because of the pandemic? What I mean by that is that people said, well, I don't want anybody in my home right now. I don't want people walking in. I don't want to do anything. I'm kind of just trying to stay put for now. Do you think that had any impact, that now that things are kind of reopening a little bit more, do you think that will lead to a little bit more inventory? And is that why you're saying that maybe there'll be a little bit more inventory?
I do believe what you said to be 100% accurate. People didn't want people in their homes because of the pandemic. You also have people that were willing to sell, but they just couldn't find the right property because there wasn't a lot of inventory out there to choose from. They were looking at the market going, I don't see anything I want, therefore I'm not going to sell my property. I don't want to be homeless, so I'm just going to stay put for now. I thought as things eased, the more people got vaccinated, you would have already start to see a lot of those properties that people were worried about come to the market. So I do believe a good portion of those properties that where people thought that have come to the market. There are still people sitting waiting for the right home to come to the market. I have clients that they're ready to sell their house if something comes up. They don't want to be in this game of limbo and contingencies and what have you. So that's part of it. The whole Delta thing and that playing into the market could you start to see more people less willing to show their property because of it? Absolutely. I think that could be a factor, but I honestly don't know. I don't know how many of those people are out there that are still super scared of this thing, that aren't willing to let people in their homes, that are thinking of selling. I mean, there's probably a portion of people out there. I just don't know what those numbers are, and it's too hard to say. But I think inventory is going to pick up just gradually, just because, again, you're going to have people that, I think we're at the end of summer, for most people, right? Kids are back in school. So a lot of, the seasonality of what happens in the market on a normal basis, take this year or last year outside of that, is that things start to slow now, right? I mean, kids are in school, parents don't want to move them from a school. The holidays are coming up. People are trying to get in a position to kind of move into that period of the year. So typically home buying slows down. You don't see a lot of new inventory come on the market during that time of year. Last year was a little bit different because, you lost a quarter in the year, right? You kind of lost the spring selling season. So everything kind of shifted forward a quarter, in my opinion. So the spring became the summer became the spring, the fall became the summer, the winter became the fall. And then you kind of missed this one cycle. So, things continue to move all through last year. You might still see some of that this year, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of inventory come to the market during that time, just because it's holidays. People just want to chill, and a lot of people want to be around family now that they're able to do that. And there's just a lot of things playing into it. But I think as you come into next year, people start to really figure out, okay, can I work from home? Was it a right move moving here? People have had some time to think. I think you're probably going to see inventory in the market kind of heat back up again. But it's hard to say, right? We need interest rates to stay where they are. We need the Fed to continue to buy mortgage-backed securities, pump money into the market, which I think they have to some extent. Now, when I say we need to, in order for things to kind of move along like they've moved, interest rates going higher slows things a little bit. I think the Fed not buying mortgage-backed securities, pumping money, that slows things a little bit. So it just depends. I mean, at some point, the market needs to slow because we can't continue at that pace forever. And we need more gradual appreciation. And I think, as we head into 2022, it's going to be a lot like 2021. You're not going to see a lot of pullout from the Fed or what have you. I mean, the consensus, I believe, is 2023 is when you're really going to start to see some movement in the market. And I think, towards the end of next year is when you really start to think, okay, what's the plan over the next 5 to 7 years? And so I think, again, if you're in it for the longer haul, there's nothing to be concerned with. But if you're in it for the short-term game, then obviously you might want to reconsider.
Perfect. Any final thoughts, Jeb?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, again, I think it's a good opportunity to buy property, if it's the right time in your life, right? Which means, it's not for everyone, right? Owning property isn't for everyone. There's maintenance that comes along with it. There's cost. There's not being able to move whenever you want. There's a lot of things that go into owning a home. But I believe if you're at that point in your life where you're starting a family, you're trying to set down roots, you're trying to build generational wealth, and you have a longer term horizon, I think owning a property is a good way to do it.
Perfect. You know what I got from our interview? You have a very genuine approach, meaning that you're not sugarcoating things. You're very, it seems, at least on my end, like you're very.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot, man, because I really am just trying to be real with people. I mean, I'm talking to you like I'm talking to clients, and just I'm not this gregarious, big personality. I just I'm pretty straightforward and just trying to help people get where they're trying to go, and with the least resistance. And so I appreciate it. I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah. For me, I agree on we agree on a lot of the same philosophies. Like for me, is it if it's a good time in your life, or if it's a good time to sell in your life. It's not always the best. Some people are like, oh, you got to buy a home. It's the best thing. But if you don't buy a home, this or that, it just depends on the individual and what their goals and objectives are, and our job as agents is to help them accomplish that. So I've enjoyed obviously having you on the show. If people wanted to find you or follow you or ask you some questions, or maybe somebody's moving to Orange County, what would be the best way for somebody to connect with you?
You can search my name pretty much any social media platform, and I'll come up. So Jeb Smith on YouTube, at Jeb Smith on Insta, and those are really the main two I use. I'm on TikTok, but I show up like once every 4 months or so just to look through some videos. But other than that, those are the best ways. And then you can check out my website, jebsmith.net, and all my contact information is on there if you need me.
Awesome. Well, I've enjoyed having you on the show. To all our viewers, this was episode number 78. We had Jeb Smith, Coldwell Banker, real estate broker out in Orange County. Once again, if you've enjoyed some of our previous episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button and feel free to share it with some friends and family if you feel that it would add value, and stay tuned for the next episodes. Thanks again, Jeb. We appreciate you having on the show, and we'll be in contact.
Thanks, Jose Luiz. At ease.